The rain had eased into a fine mist, the kind that clung to your skin without making a sound. Daniel barely noticed the damp chill creeping through his hoodie and into his bones. The bench beneath him was slick and cold, but his thoughts were heavier than the weather. The park was nearly deserted now, only the occasional shuffle of wet leaves as the wind moved through the trees. Streetlights stood like lonely sentinels along the path, their yellow halos glowing faintly in the fog. The stranger beside him sat with quiet composure, holding an old umbrella closed at his side, the wooden handle worn smooth by years of use. His coat was a little too big for him, the fabric faded, but there was nothing careless about the way he carried himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and even, like water flowing slowly over stones. "You're carrying something heavy," he said. Not as a question, but as a truth already known. Daniel's first instinct was to brush it off, maybe offer a quick nod and retreat into silence. But something in the man's tone, gentle, almost reluctant, kept him from moving. He glanced sideways and found the man looking straight ahead as though speaking to the night itself. There was no pity in his face, no forced smile, just a calm that felt strangely solid. The man began to tell his story, not in a rush, but with the slow rhythm of someone turning over old stones to show what lay beneath. He spoke of his younger years, the fire that burned in him to build something of his own. He started with nothing, just an idea, a willingness to work until his body ached, and the stubborn belief that if he pushed hard enough, he could bend life to his will. For years, he poured himself into his business. The days blurred together, early mornings spent planning, late nights chasing invoices, and weekends spent chasing opportunities while others rested. Eventually, the work bore fruit. His small company became stable, then successful. He bought the house he had dreamed of since boyhood. He filled it with furniture and photographs, and he thought he had built a fortress against the uncertainties of the world. But the man's voice shifted when he reached the years that followed. A recession hit, contracts vanished. Expenses piled up while revenue withered. He tried to keep the business afloat, burning through savings, borrowing, sacrificing sleep. At home, the pressure seeped into every conversation, turning laughter into arguments and arguments into silences that stretched for days. The day his wife left, she didn't slam the door, she simply closed it softly and didn't come back. She took their daughter with her. The man didn't blame her, not anymore, but at the time it felt like the final thread had been cut. Friends who once celebrated his victories stopped returning his calls. The phone went silent. The house, once full of noise and warmth, became a museum of what used to be. His eyes stayed fixed on the path ahead as he told Daniel about the winter that followed. The heating was cut off after he missed too many bills. Frost gathered on the inside of the windows. Some days he didn't bother to get out of bed. Food dwindled to whatever was left in the pantry. He stopped answering the door. Days blurred into nights until it no longer mattered which was which. "I thought," he said quietly, "that the world had decided it was done with me." Daniel swallowed hard, feeling a hollow ache in his own chest. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. The man's words were peeling back the same shadows Daniel had been sitting in for months. Then the man told him about the night he almost ended it. He didn't dress it up with drama, didn't offer details beyond the fact that it had been quiet, dark, and that he was certain no one would notice if he was gone. But something he couldn't even name what had made him pause. It wasn't hope or courage, nothing so noble. It was just a thought, he said. What if I stayed one more day? Just one. That day came and went, then another. And another. At first, he said, it was mechanical survival, boiling water for tea, opening the curtains in the morning even when there was nothing to look at, washing a single plate because it was the only one dirty. They were tiny acts, but they were something. It didn't make me happy, he admitted, but it kept me moving. He began walking to the corner store for fresh bread every morning. Sometimes he didn't eat it right away, sometimes just holding something warm was enough. He started writing down one thing each day that didn't hurt to remember: the smell of rain on dry pavement, the sound of a child's laugh in the distance, the way sunlight hit the wall in the late afternoon. At first I thought it was pointless, he said, but I realized it was proof. Proof that even in the worst days, there were still pieces worth keeping. Months passed. The pain didn't vanish, but it changed. It stopped feeling like a wall blocking him in and began to feel like a road he was walking on, one slow step at a time. He found work again, not the kind that made headlines, but honest, steady work that gave him a reason to get up in the morning. Years later, by some twist of fate, he reconnected with his daughter. It wasn't a fairy tale reunion, but it was real. They spoke awkwardly at first, cautiously. But over time, they learned each other again, not as they once were, but as they were now. And real, he said, glancing at Daniel, is better than perfect. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to speak, but the words caught. The stranger's voice was quiet but certain when he said, "You think your life is over because it doesn't look the way you imagined. But maybe the life you're meant to live hasn't even started yet. And that pain you feel? It's not weakness. It's proof you still care enough to feel. That means you're not finished." For the first time in months, Daniel felt something shift inside him, not joy, not relief, but the faintest opening in the heavy fog. The man's story had left a mark, not because it promised a happy ending, but because it didn't, it promised something else instead, that surviving was enough to begin again. They spoke for a little while longer. Daniel surprised himself by saying things he hadn't admitted to anyone, that he didn't feel like himself anymore, that every day felt heavier than the last, that sometimes he wondered if disappearing would be easier. The man didn't try to argue him out of it or throw cliches at him. He just listened, nodding now and then, letting the words hang in the cold air. At some point, Daniel realized the rain had stopped entirely. The mist was lifting, and through a break in the clouds, a faint streak of moonlight spilled across the path. He turned to ask the man's name, maybe to thank him, but the bench beside him was empty. In his place, leaning against the damp wood, was the old umbrella. Its handle was smooth and warm, as if it had been placed there only seconds ago. Daniel picked it up, feeling the weight of it in his hand. He stood slowly, the heaviness in his chest still there, but lighter, shifted somehow. He didn't know what the next day would bring, didn't know how to fix the pieces of his life, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he wanted to see it. As he walked down the empty path, the sound of his own footsteps echoing softly, a thought rose in him, not loud, not certain, but steady enough to carry. Life hadn't let him go yet. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready to let go either.